Throw away for obvious reasons. I've been staring at this screen for an hour now, deleting, rewriting, trying to figure out how to even start. Some stories sit inside you for so long, they start to rot. And if you don't let them out, they eat you alive. I'm 31 now. I have a wife, a son, and a career I built from nothing. By all accounts, I should be happy. And I am. But then, a few months ago, my past came knocking. And suddenly, I was 15 again, standing in the doorway of the only home I had ever known, while my father looked me in the eye and told me I wasn't his son anymore. This all started years ago. My mom died when I was 4. Cancer. I don't remember much about her, just flashes. The way she smelled, like vanilla and something floral. The way she used to hum when she tucked me in. How her hands were always warm, even when mine were cold. And then one day, she was gone. When I was 7, Dad remarried. Linda. At first, she did that whole trying too hard thing, bought me toys, called me sweetheart, made my favorite meals. I remember thinking, maybe this won't be so bad. Then she got pregnant with Sarah. And everything changed. Dad had always been strict, but after Sarah was born, he became relentless. It wasn't just about discipline, it was about control. If I got a B+, he wanted to know why it wasn't an A. If I made the basketball team, he wanted to know why I wasn't starting. But Sarah? She could fail a test, throw a tantrum, break something expensive, and it was always, oh, honey, it's okay. You tried your best. Linda made sure I knew my place. Little things, at first. Forgetting to make enough food, so I'd have to make myself a sandwich. Accidentally ruining my clothes in the wash. Moving my stuff, and then telling Dad I was messy. I tried to tell him, but he'd just sigh and say, Kevin, stop causing trouble. And I believed him. I believed I was the problem. Until the day I saw Linda kissing another man. It was a random Tuesday. I was cutting through Wilson Park, taking my usual shortcut home, when I saw them by the old gazebo. At first, I thought, maybe it's just a friend. But then she leaned in, and it wasn't just a friendly kiss. The guy? Victor. Some rich businessman she worked with on her charity projects. I'd seen him in our house before. I remember standing there, frozen. Like my brain couldn't process what my eyes were seeing. Then something in my gut twisted, and I ran. I don't think she saw me. But deep down, I knew this was dangerous. Telling Dad? Useless. He'd never believe me. Linda had been planting seeds for years, making me out to be troubled, jealous of Sarah, ungrateful. So I stayed quiet. But I started noticing things I couldn't unsee. Like how Sarah's hair was this reddish-brown that no one else in our family had. Like how Linda got nervous whenever Victor was around. And then, one night, I overheard Linda on the phone. I was getting a glass of water when I heard her voice. Low, urgent. I stopped just outside the kitchen, heart pounding. You don't understand, Victor. He's starting to notice. Silence. Then, he thinks she's his. But we both know the truth. I felt the air get sucked out of the room. Sarah wasn't Dad's. She was Victor's. I must have made a noise because Linda's voice changed in an instant. Honey? Why are you up so late? I bolted. After that, she started watching me. If I even walked past Sarah's room, she'd appear out of nowhere. I sharp. She whispered to Dad when she thought I couldn't hear. I'm worried about Kevin. He's been acting strange around Sarah. I didn't know what she was planning. Not until I walked into my house 2 weeks later and saw 2 cop cars parked outside. Linda was sobbing on the couch. My stomach twisted. Fake crying. The kind people do when they want to be heard. Dad stood in the corner, arms crossed, his face carved from stone. A cop turned to me. Son, we need to talk. They took me into the kitchen. Sat me down. And then, Sarah told us you've been touching her inappropriately. The words didn't even make sense at first. My brain just stopped. What? I finally croaked. No. No, that never happened. They kept pressing. Where did you touch her? How many times? Did you threaten her to keep quiet? I felt like I was drowning. From the other room, Linda let out a broken sob. I should have known, she wailed. I saw the signs. Dad still hadn't said a word. I turned to him, my vision blurring. Dad, you know me. Stop, he snapped. His voice was sharp. Final. I choked on my words. Then I did the stupidest thing I could have done. I told them about Victor. Linda's head snapped up. But I wasn't looking at her. I was looking at him. Dad, she's lying. She's trying to get rid of me because I saw her cheating on you. Big mistake. Dad exploded. You sick little. His voice shook with rage. You're jealous of Sarah, so now you're trying to destroy our family? He called me every name in the book. Then he grabbed a garbage bag, threw it at my feet. You have 10 minutes to pack your things and get the hell out. I pleaded. Swore I was telling the truth. He didn't care. You're not my son, he spat. Linda stood behind him, smirking. Not obviously. Just a tiny, satisfied upturn of her lips. I packed as fast as I could. Clothes, my school backpack. Reached for my Game Boy. Dad ripped it out of my hands. Everything in this house is mine. By the time I came back downstairs, Sarah was there. She looked confused. Linda had her arms wrapped around her like she was protecting her. And that's what kills me the most. The look on Sarah's face. She was just a kid. A pawn in Linda's twisted game. Dad ripped my house key from my hand. Then, quietly, like he was saying something simple, something obvious, he said, You're not my son anymore. Linda put on her best sad face. Maybe someday you'll get the help you need. I wanted to scream. To force them to listen. But what was the point? I walked out. They stood at the door, watching, making sure I actually left. I looked back once. Dad had his arms around Sarah. And Linda? She was still crying. The last thing I heard before the door slammed shut. You're safe now, honey. I walked for hours that night. Didn't know where I was going, just that I had nowhere to go. The cold crept under my clothes, my backpack strap dug into my shoulder, and my stomach twisted with something I couldn't name. Shock. Grief. Rage. Mostly, it was just numbness. I had $40 in my wallet. Nowhere to sleep. No one to call. I thought about going to a friend's house, but Linda had probably already gotten to them. She was good at that, twisting the story until even I would have doubted myself. Eventually, I ended up near the train tracks, outside an old warehouse I'd seen homeless people hang around. I stood there, staring at the flickering streetlight, wondering if this was really it. 15 years old, homeless, and accused of something so vile I'd probably never live it down. A door creaked open behind me. You lost, kid. I turned. An older man stood there, maybe late 50s, wrapped in a coat that looked like it had been through hell. His face was lined, his beard streaked with gray, but his eyes were sharp. I swallowed hard. No. My voice cracked. Yeah, I guess. The man studied me for a moment, then sighed and stepped back. Come on. It's freezing out here. I hesitated. He gave me a dry look. Kid, if I wanted to rob you, I'd have done it already. Fair point. So I followed him inside. The warehouse was cold, even with the scattered sleeping bags and makeshift beds in the corners. A few other guys were there, huddled under layers of clothes, some already asleep. The man sat down on an overturned crate and gestured for me to do the same. Name's Tom. He eyed me. What's your story? I stared at my hands. What was I supposed to say? My stepmother framed me for something horrific, and my father threw me out without a second thought? Tom must have seen something in my face because he just nodded. Yeah, I get it. And somehow, I believe that he did. The next 6 months were a blur of survival. Tom taught me everything: where to get food, which places let you use their bathrooms, how to stay warm when the temperatures dropped. The first few weeks, I barely spoke. Couldn't process what had happened. One night, I woke up shivering, my hoodie pulled tight around me. Here. Tom tossed something at me. I caught it, an old, worn-out coat. Smelled like cigarettes and cheap cologne. It's yours now, he said gruffly. Don't argue. I didn't. It was the first thing in months that actually felt mine. I tried getting a job. No one would hire me. Linda had made sure everyone in town knew her version of the story. Even McDonald's wouldn't take me. So I did things I wasn't proud of. Nothing violent. Nothing that would get me locked up. But when you're starving and no one will give you a chance, you make choices you never thought you would. Tom knew. He never asked, never judged. Kid, he said one night, as we sat outside a diner, splitting a sandwich, you need to get out of this town. You got a shot at something better. This place is poison for you. I looked at him. And go where? He took a slow drag from his cigarette. Chicago. I frowned. Why there? My cousin's got a few restaurants out there. He owes me a favor. He tapped the ash off the cigarette. You're young. You can still start over. The thought terrified me. But staying? That was worse. 2 weeks later, we got kicked out of the warehouse. Cops showed up, gave us 10 minutes to clear out. I lost most of my stuff that night. Not that I had much. But the worst part? I lost the coat Tom gave me. By morning, we were at a truck stop diner. I was counting my last $27 when Tom slid $40 across the table. The hell is this? I muttered. He sighed. It's for the bus. Get to Chicago. Find my cousin. I pushed it back. No way. You need this more than me. His face hardened. I'm old, kid. This life? It's all I got left. But you, he jabbed a finger at my chest. You still got a damn chance. I swallowed hard. Take it. His voice softened. While you still can. So I did. And I never saw Tom again. Chicago was different. Bigger. Louder. Colder. I spent my first week sleeping in the bus station. Didn't eat for the first 2 days. Was too scared to spend the money. Then I finally worked up the nerve to find Tom's cousin, Dave. He wasn't what I expected. Clean cut, always in a pressed shirt, ran 3 different restaurants. When I told him Tom sent me, he just sighed. Dishwasher, he said. Pays shit, but it's a start. And just like that, I had a job. For the first time in months, I had something to do besides just survive. I worked like hell. Didn't talk much, just kept my head down. After a few months, Dave let me crash in the storage room after hours. I saved every penny I could. Eventually, I got promoted to prep cook, then line cook. That's when I met Amanda. She was a regular at the restaurant, always coming in with her mom. The first time she sat in my section, she actually looked at me. What's good here? She asked, smiling. I hesitated. The carbonara. Marco makes the sauce from scratch. She tilted her head. You actually know who makes the food? I shrugged. I work here. She laughed. Most places I go, the servers just read the specials and disappear. Something about her put me at ease. She kept coming back. Always asked for my section. We'd talk when it wasn't too busy, about food, about business, about random shit. One night, she was struggling with her accounting homework. This makes no sense, she groaned. How can a company lose money but still show a profit? I refilled her water. Creative accounting. Probably moving numbers around to make it look good for investors. She blinked at me. How do you know about corporate accounting? I hesitated. Didn't want to tell her I spent my days off reading business books in the library, trying to understand how restaurants worked. But I did. And instead of looking surprised, she grinned. That's amazing. That was the first real compliment I'd gotten in years. And yeah, I fell for her. Hard. But I never told her. Because in the back of my mind, I kept hearing Linda's voice. Maybe someday you'll get the help you need. I wasn't good enough for Amanda. Not yet. So I focused on working. Studying. Eventually, I got my GED. Amanda helped with the math. She never asked about my past. And I never told her. That was my life for 5 years. Wake up. Work. Study. Sleep. Didn't date. Didn't make friends. Just tried to be better. But no matter how much I moved forward, a part of me was still waiting. Waiting for Dad to wake up. Waiting for him to realize the truth. Waiting for him to come find me. But he never did. One night, Amanda came into the restaurant looking excited. She slid into her usual booth, grinning. Guess what? I set a water glass in front of her. You finally dropped out of business school and decided to become a chef? She rolled her eyes. Not quite. My dad's looking for someone to help manage a new real estate development project. Entry level, but lots of room to grow. I nodded, not really getting why she was telling me. You should apply, she said. I let out a short laugh. Amanda, I never even finished high school. She tilted her head. But you got your GED, right? That's all that matters. Come on, just try. What's the worst that could happen? I could think of a lot of worst-case scenarios. Like her dad finding out about my past. About Linda. About everything. But Amanda kept pushing. Please? For me? She said, giving me that look that always made my brain short-circuit. So I applied. The interview was terrifying. Her dad, Mark Caldwell, was one of those men who could make a room go silent just by walking into it. He was calm, collected, but something about him was sharp, like he was always measuring you. He stared at me for a full minute before speaking. Amanda says you understand business, he said. Prove it. I don't know how I managed it, but I started talking. About trends in real estate. About what I'd read on property development. About the mistakes I'd seen restaurant owners make, and how better planning could have saved them. At the end of the interview, he just nodded. You start Monday. When I told Amanda I got the job, she hugged me. First time anyone had hugged me in years. I almost cried right there in the restaurant. That job changed everything. Mark became the father I wished I'd had. He actually listened when I had ideas. Taught me everything about real estate development. Within a year, I was managing my own projects. Amanda and I got closer, too. We'd get coffee after work, talk for hours. But I never asked her out. Because in the back of my mind, I kept thinking if she knew the truth, she'd walk away. Then one night, we were working late in the office. Just the two of us, going over project proposals. For someone so smart about business, she said suddenly, you're really dumb about some things. I looked up. What? She met my eyes. I've been waiting 2 years for you to ask me out. I just sat there like an idiot. Finally managed to say, I'm not good enough for you, Amanda. There's stuff about me you don't know. Try me. So I told her. About Linda. About the lies. About being homeless. Kept waiting for her to look disgusted. Instead, she started crying. Then she got mad. Those horrible people, she said. How could they do that to their own son? Then she kissed me. And yeah, that's how Amanda and I finally got together. Life got better after that. We got married pretty fast. Her family was amazing. Actually treated me like family. We had our first kid, Jake. Bought a beautiful 5-bedroom house in a nice neighborhood. For the first time in my life, I felt safe. Then, 3 months ago, everything changed. I was at work, scrolling through Facebook on my lunch break, when I saw the friend request. The profile picture showed my father. Older. Gray hair. He looked tired. My stomach twisted. Amanda noticed something was wrong the second I got home. Babe, she said, setting Jake down for his nap. What happened? I sat at the kitchen table, staring at my phone. My dad found me. Her expression darkened. Did he message you? I nodded. Handed her the phone. She opened the message and started reading out loud. Son, I know it's been a long time. I've been thinking a lot about the past. Not a day goes by that I don't think about you. Linda and I want to make things right. Sarah misses her big brother. Please give us a chance to explain. I laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh. Sarah misses me? I scoffed. She probably doesn't even remember me. She was 8 when they threw me out. Amanda squeezed my hand. You don't have to respond. But I did. Maybe I was an idiot. But I needed to know, why now? So I messaged back. Why now? His response came fast. I'm 58 now. Had some health scares. Made me realize life's too short for grudges. Sarah's getting married soon. Would mean a lot to have you there. We messaged back and forth for a few weeks. Found out Sarah was 24 now, worked in marketing, engaged to some lawyer. Linda was still the same, according to Dad. Amanda kept warning me. People don't change that much, she said. Be careful. But I wanted to believe. So when they asked to visit, I said yes. Big mistake. They showed up on a Saturday morning. Dad looked old. Walked with a slight limp. But Linda? She hadn't aged a day. Still had that fake, syrupy smile. And Sarah? She looked exactly like Victor now. But no one seemed to notice. First few minutes were awkward. Then Sarah saw the family photos on the wall. Is this your son? She asked, pointing to a picture of Jake. Yeah, I said. Her eyes got watery. I'm an aunt, she whispered. Then she started crying. Linda immediately rushed to comfort her, playing the loving mother role. Dad stepped into my house like he belonged there. Eyes sweeping over everything. You've done well for yourself, he said. Real estate development, huh? Never would have guessed. I folded my arms. Amanda's dad gave me a chance. Let the words hang. Unlike some people. Linda jumped in before the silence got too heavy. We all made mistakes back then, she said, voice dripping with fake sincerity. We're here to make things right. Amanda, who had been standing near the door, arms crossed, took the out. I'll check on Jake, she said, disappearing before she said something she'd regret. Smart. Sarah, meanwhile, was wandering through the living room, touching the furniture, the walls. This house is amazing, she said. 5 bedrooms, but you only have 1 kid? I forced a polite smile. Planning for more. Dad clapped a hand on my shoulder. Steered me toward my office. Let's talk. Man to man. That should have been my first warning. He sank into my chair like he owned it. Son, he started. I need to ask you something important. I stayed standing. What? He sighed, like he was bracing himself. Sarah's getting married. Starting a family. They're looking for a house, but everything's so expensive these days. My stomach turned. No. I already knew where this was going. You've got all this space, he continued. 5 bedrooms for 3 people. Sarah and Steve could really use a place like this. I stared at him. Are you seriously asking me to give my house to Sarah? Well, not give, he said. Maybe sell it to them. Cheap. You make good money now. I lost it. I let out a sharp, breathless laugh. One of those laughs that aren't really laughs at all. You threw me out at 15, I said, shaking my head. I lived on the streets. And now you want me to give my house to Sarah? Dad sighed like I was the unreasonable one. Son, be rational. She's your sister. Is she? I cut him off, my voice cold. Because last I checked, I wasn't part of this family anymore. His jaw tightened. That was a long time ago. Things were different. For you, maybe. My hands curled into fists at my sides. Not for me. Before he could speak, Linda appeared in the doorway, her voice laced with forced concern. Is everything all right in here? I turned to her, my grin razor-sharp. Oh yeah, Linda. Everything's fantastic. Dad's just asking me to hand over my house to your daughter. Silence. The kind that makes the air feel thick. Linda went stiff. Dad froze. Sarah, who had been hovering near the doorway, looked confused. What? She asked, her voice quiet. I didn't give Linda a chance to recover. You heard me, I said, locking eyes with Sarah. Dad wants me to give you this house. But the funny thing is, he's not even your father. The color drained from Sarah's face. What the hell are you talking about? Dad's fists clenched. Linda's mouth opened, but no words came out. Sarah looked at them, then back at me. Someone say something. Dad turned to Linda. Is it true? Her expression flickered between panic and calculation. Dawn, you know Kevin has always. Answer the damn question, Linda, he snapped. Sarah's breath hitched. Dad? I watched it hit her. The realization creeping in. Her hands started shaking. Victor, she whispered. The guy from your charity events? Linda reached for her, but Sarah flinched away. Sarah, honey, it's not. Tell me the truth, Sarah said, her voice cracking. Right now. Linda's lips parted, but she hesitated. And in that moment, Sarah knew. She let out a hollow laugh. Oh my God. Oh my God. Her head snapped toward Dad. You knew. His face twisted. No. Linda tried again. Sarah, let's talk about this privately. Sarah shoved past her, breathing hard. Privately? You've been lying to me my whole life, and now you want to do damage control. Sarah, please. Don't. Sarah's voice was trembling, but there was steel in it. Dad's face was unreadable, but I saw the way his hands shook at his sides, the way he wouldn't look at Linda. Then he turned to me. You've known all along. It wasn't a question. I exhaled. I suspected when I was 15. I knew after I overheard Linda on the phone. But by then, what did it matter? I tilted my head. Would you have believed me? Something flickered in his eyes. Guilt. Shame. But it was too little, too late. Linda was still scrambling, still desperate to regain control. This doesn't change anything. Dawn, you raised her. She's still your daughter. Dad turned to her, his voice eerily calm. Get out. Linda blinked. What? I said, get out. She let out a broken laugh. Dawn, you don't mean it. Get the fuck out of my house, Linda. For the first time, she looked scared. Sarah was still standing in the middle of the room, shaking. Dad took a deep breath. Then, voice tight, he said, we're getting a DNA test. Sarah let out a sob. Not the fake kind Linda was so good at. The real kind. The kind that sounded like something breaking. She didn't argue. She just nodded. The next week was chaos. Dad actually went through with the DNA test. Came to my office when he got the results. Didn't even wait to get home. Just walked in, sat down, and broke. Didn't yell. Didn't rage. Just sat there, staring at the results like they were a death sentence. 0% chance. Sarah wasn't his. Everything he thought he knew about his life for the past 24 years? A lie. I should have felt satisfied. Should have felt something. But all I felt was empty. This man, who had terrified me as a kid, looked small. He rubbed a hand down his face. Where's Victor now? I shrugged. Last I heard, he was bouncing between homeless shelters. Probably still an addict. Dad exhaled. Then he stood up and walked out. And I thought that was the end of it. Thought they'd deal with their mess. But the next day, Amanda called me at work. Her voice was tense. Kevin, something happened. Turned out, Dad had snapped. Went home and confronted Linda. And this time, he didn't just yell. He hurt her. Badly. 3 fractured vertebrae. She was in the hospital, pumped full of pain meds. Sarah had been the one to call the cops. Dad got arrested right there in their living room. Now he was facing 3 to 5 years in prison. And Sarah? Her whole world had collapsed overnight. Her wedding was off. Turns out, her fancy lawyer fiancé wasn't interested in inheriting this level of baggage. Now she was blowing up my phone, begging me to help her find her real dad. Amanda kept telling me to block her, to walk away. And she was probably right. But part of me couldn't. Not for Linda. Not for Dad. But for Sarah. Because none of this had been her fault. I ignored Sarah's calls at first. Amanda would see my phone light up, glance at the screen, then look at me. Kevin, she'd say, voice calm but firm, you don't owe her anything. And she was right. But it wasn't that simple. Sarah had been a kid when everything happened. She hadn't schemed against me, hadn't lied about me. She had just been used. By Linda, by Dad, by the whole damn lie that was their perfect little family. So, after the 10th missed call, I finally picked up. She didn't even say hello. Just a shaky breath. Then, I don't know what to do. I sighed. About what? Everything. Her voice was raw, broken. I went looking for Victor. My stomach dropped. Sarah, I had to, she said quickly. I had to see for myself. I ran a hand down my face. And she sniffled. He's dead. I closed my eyes. When, 2 years ago, overdosed behind some convenience store. She let out a bitter laugh. Not that he ever would have been Father of the Year, but still, it's like I don't exist. I exhaled slowly. That's not true. She let out a shaky breath. I don't know who I am anymore, Kevin. I thought about that. Thought about what it must be like to wake up one day and realize your whole life was built on a lie. Yeah, I knew that feeling. But I also knew what came next. The loneliness, the anger, the drowning. And I couldn't let her pull me under with her. So I swallowed hard and said, you'll figure it out. Silence. Then, softer. Can we stay in touch? I hesitated. Because I knew what would happen. Sarah was drowning. And if I let her, she'd cling to me like I was the only thing keeping her afloat. And I couldn't do that. Not to her. Not to myself. So I exhaled and said, maybe someday. But not now. She didn't argue. Just let out a breath that sounded suspiciously like a sob. Okay. And then she hung up. Amanda sat next to me on the couch, took my phone out of my hands and set it aside, then curled into my side, her warmth grounding me. She's not your responsibility, Kevin, she murmured. I swallowed hard. I know. And for once, I actually believed it. Linda, because I'd never call her Beth again, didn't last long on the outside. She'd been on pain meds since Dad put her in the hospital, but it turned out she'd been popping pills way before that. Her sister, Sarah's aunt, checked her into rehab. Sarah moved in with her for a while, refusing to even speak to Linda. A few weeks later, she texted me one last time. I'm leaving. Moving out of state. Need a fresh start. I hope you're happy, Kevin. You deserve to be. I stared at the message for a long time, then put my phone down and didn't reply. Dad's trial was last month. I didn't go. Didn't want to see him. My lawyer advised against it anyway. Said there was nothing good that could come from being in that courtroom. Sarah told me later he got 3 years. Could have been worse, but the judge took his age and clean record into account. Still, at 58, 3 years is a long time. The weirdest part? His side of the family started reaching out to me. Some defending him, some furious at him. But none of them, not a single one, had given a shit about where I was for the last 16 years. Funny how family works sometimes. The house feels different now. Like all the negative energy from that visit is finally gone. Amanda and I are turning what would have been Sarah's room into a nursery. She's pregnant again. A girl this time. She's got it all planned out. Pink and gray theme, little stars on the ceiling. Sometimes I watch Jake playing and think about Sarah at that age. And I wonder if Dad had noticed the signs earlier. If I'd told someone else about seeing Linda with Victor, would things have been different? But you can't change the past. You just live with it. I still think about Tom sometimes. The man who saved my life when no one else would. I wish I could find him. Tell him I made something of myself. Show him he was right. That I had a shot. That I took it. And that I won. Because the best revenge? It isn't ruining your enemies. It's being happy.